We'll go live, see if it behaves itself. Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. This evening, I'm delighted to be joined by Hannah Brennan, and Hannah has a new book out this week, I believe, called No Safe Place. Hopefully that's the right way around. So hi Hannah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And would you like to talk about your debut novel, No Safe Place?
Yeah, this is actually my first interview, so
Oh, excellent, even better.
Everyone's got to be very patient with me.
No,
But
I will be.
so No Safe Place is about DCI Liz Field, and she is a DCI in a MIT team, a major investigation team in London, and she tends to get all the crap cases. But one night she happens to be the DCI on call, and is first on scene at a really horrific stabbing. And she's not letting this case go. She's determined to get to the bottom of this. And our victim is a very renowned child psychologist, a specialist in obsessive compulsive disorder. And there is something at the scene which leads them to believe it's all linked to a past case and a trial he worked on with some teenagers 15 years ago. And that's where we start.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, it's a really gripping read, and for a debut, it's really, really involved, and also like the police procedural side of it. We'll come back to that in a second, but I was really sort of, for your first book, it's so detailed and it's involved in it. So I really, really enjoyed that side of it. That's because police procedural is not something that I read loads of. So I love crime, but it's just, for me, it had a lot of different aspects in it that I really enjoyed. So what inspired you to write No Safe Place?
So when it came to writing the book, I was working on something else, which wasn't particularly working. And I just had this opening scene, and I had this opening scene in my head that kind of wouldn't let me go. So I wrote it, and it was probably about 3,000 words, and I sent it to my writing group, and they really, really enjoyed it. But as I started writing the story, I realized that this was not the opening of the book, and that actually had to come about a third of the way in. So you might know which scene I mean. But yeah, so then I did some restructuring, and part of that restructuring and working out what the story was about was when Field and her team and all those characters started to come. But yeah, just one opening moment was all I had when I started. But
so that's quite a big sort of jump from like that just little moment to what it develops into, and it's very complex and complicated, isn't it? There's a lot of aspects of the book that we can't talk about tonight because
spoilers.
because that'll be spoilers, but we can talk around them, so it's fine. I'm just looking, so we've got Sarah and Kaz both saying hi, and Sarah said she met you at Harrogate and your book is great. So
Lovely Sarah. Hi Sarah.
And Laura also says hi, and Kaz. So yeah, and Vicky. So we've got lots of people watching. So so why crime fiction? Because I saw it's not your full-time job, is it? So what sort of made you sort of think this is what the genre I want to write?
Being really honest, I started writing crime fiction to win a bet. So I was convinced I wanted to write YA, and I wrote a very dreadful version of the Hunger Games, essentially, and tried for a long time to get an agent with that book. It was a good practice novel, but I didn't read a lot of YA. I think I just didn't really know what I wanted to write. But I've always watched a lot of crime fiction, crime telly, read a lot of crime fiction. And then one day I was in a pub after work with a colleague. We'd had quite a lot of rosé. And we plotted the murder of someone in our team. And at the time, I had a really bad habit of falling asleep on the train home. And waking up at the end of the line. And to keep myself awake, I had bet her that I would write the whole novel of the murder of this colleague. And to keep myself awake, I wrote chapter 1 on my phone on the train home and sent it to her when I got off at the train station. Hungover, she read it the next day and said, "This is hilarious. Can you write some more?" And then I started sending it to my writing group, and they were like, "This is actually quite good." By the time I'd finished the book, it was way better than the YA I'd tried to write. And I think it's really common for people to write in the wrong genre at first. So it was a happy accident. But the Office Murder Mystery isn't the book that got me published. It did get me into crime, so it was very useful in that sense.
I'm absolutely fascinated with the Office Murder Mystery. I think that's just so good. I just love that because I work in animal nutrition, and my boss is always laughing about the fact that I'm always like trying to think of like gruesome deaths for people. That could be that. That could be that. So I think it's quite interesting, isn't it, when you like inadvertently come into something. And do you think this is your genre now? Do you think you'll stay in crime fiction, or would you still like to do YA? Because some people do both.
Yeah, I think I really enjoy reading YA, but I don't think it's probably not a genre I will write in again. I did accidentally write a rom-com during lockdown because I was very single and living with my parents, and I sent it to my agent and said, "I've written this thriller." And he replied and said, "Hannah, this is a rom-com." So never rule out writing romance one day, but for now, very much crime is my happy place in a weird way. But yeah.
So the characters. So we talked about Detective Liz Field. So she's the sort of investigating officer, and she excuse me, she comes along when the first victim is stabbed. And at the scene of the crime, you said that she finds. I think it's okay to say. Sorry, I'm just deciding to choke now. I think it's okay to say that she finds a bloodied sheet of paper, doesn't she?
Yeah.
At the scene of the crime. How did that sort of come about? That sort of first clue, because that's very important and instrumental, isn't it, to the whole book?
Yeah, I think I knew that I wanted to link what was happening in the present to this academic trial paper that he'd written 15 years ago. And originally I had it in the book just as like a side note for the reader.
Yeah.
So I'd put it in there as something that the reader would be aware of that Field wasn't. And it was in a much later draft, actually, that was like, actually, if they find this at the first crime scene, that sets them on this path from the beginning. But yeah, it's a fun clue. Five anonymous teenagers who may all crop up in the book at some point.
Because that sort of side, that sort of So Liz, we talked about Liz very briefly before we came on. Is that Liz is a perimenopausal woman, which I very much identified with, and her, she is tired, she's angry, she's hot, she's all the things that us women of a certain age are. How did she come about?
So I think because I was writing about mental health, and because there's some quite serious themes in the book, it started because I was like, who would I want investigating this crime if I was the victim or if it was my family members? And I describe Field. She's basically my mum, and I didn't realise that until I was about 2 drafts in.
Does your mum know that?
She does.
That's good.
Taking a great deal of credit, possibly some royalties. But yeah, I think she's sort of 70% my mum. She's a little bit Catherine Kaywood from Happy Valley. She's maybe a little bit Nikki Alexander from Silent Witness. There's a lot of Telly influences in there, but at her heart, she's my mum. And also, I think writing about an older female detective who's a little bit overlooked and a bit fed up, and also pairing her with these very two young career hungry DSs that she's managing their rivalry. it was a really fun dynamic to write as well, and
Yeah.
hopefully one that people will want to read about again.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think she's. I think that's sort of sort of an older woman. They've as you said, Happy Valley. That that sort of gritty sort of. Well, we've been around the block a few times. We know what life is about. We've seen it. It's always the same. When you're working and you've got younger people coming in as well, is it can feel, it's an interesting dynamic, and you have a lot of experience. So I guess that's another reason she's a really interesting character, because she does have that experience, and she's sort of bringing that to the team, isn't it? That sort of is important for that. But I really liked her. I did really like her as a character. So yeah, I hope there will be more of her. We'll come back to that later. But what sort of research did you carry out for the book? Because I said, I think before we came on, about it's police procedural, and it's very detailed and very, you've got a lot of detail in there about the sort of how things are done, and the sort of post-mortems, sort of, crime scenes, that sort of thing. How did you go about that? Did you sort of have experts that you sort of tapped into? Was it a lot of Googling?
It's a funny story, really. So my primary source was probably Happy Valley and Silent Witness and lots of other TV shows. But I think I watch a lot of documentaries. There's like Forensics on BBC, which is excellent. And reading actually a lot of memoirs. So you've got kind of, especially on Audible, I love listening to them, the memoirs of detectives and pathologists and forensics experts. All of that was really, really useful. And also just being vague when you don't know something is a real trick.
Yeah.
In the detail you can find, and skip over the stuff that you're not sure of. But then, very coincidentally, I did meet a policeman on a dating app about 18 months ago. And I screenshotted and sent it to my WhatsApp group of crime writing friends, who were all like, he's the one. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I'd asked him so many questions that we did have to go for a drink. And I've now told him he's in contract for as long as I'm in contract. So I now have a live-in police resource, which is very...
It actually turned out like to be a long-term, not like just went on one date and that was it sort of thing.
Yeah, no, he's still on the scene. And
oh, that's excellent. I love that. It's really good.
He's been in the acknowledgements of more books than I have at this point. He's a resource for everybody in my crime writing circle. But it was really funny. So I gave him, by then the book was written, it had been to my agent, we were sort of getting ready to start sending it out. And I gave him the draft to read. We'd only been dating about 2 months. And he was like, yeah, I'll read it. He's a big reader. And I was really nervous for his feedback. And then he said, actually, I'd got most things right. There's a few minor things. I kept saying badge instead of warrant card. That's an Americanism.
Right.
A few little things like that. But then he did go quite sheepish, and he said, in that opening scene, so they're in the car, they're racing towards this stabbing, and all the noise is coming over the radio. He said, in that opening scene, where have you got that police radio chatter from? Happy Valley. And I've mentioned it so much today, but I'd watched it and paused it and written down what came over the radio. And he just said, not even close. So I did give him a red pen, and he fixed all my radio chatter for me. But apart from that, I was mostly on the money, which was nice.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
I love that story. I love how you just, how that sort of the romance element came into that as well. So, yeah.
If you see, as a little Easter egg just for you guys, you'll see one very small mention of a red-haired digital forensics officer in the background of one scene. That's his. That's as much of a mention as he gets at the early stage in the relationship. But we'll see if he gets a named character at some point soon.
Oh yeah, that would be good. Yeah, see if he sort of develops into more of a coming forward character.
Yeah.
So did anything in your sort of research surprise you, sort of, when you were sort of writing? Was anything sort of come along that you didn't expect come along? Because I know that we'll talk about, so you said there was difficult themes in the book, and OCD is one of them. You cover you talk about mental health and the sort of effects of things that happen to family members and things happen. So how did that sort of come up? You know, how did you sort of research that side of it?
So I have personal experience of OCD, which I did draw on for this book. But also, I think one of the reasons I wanted to write about it and ended up writing about it is because it's so varied and it can
Mm.
present in so many different ways. And the media, I think, gives us this really narrow view of what OCD is. And if you type it into Google Images, you'll see hand washing and light switches and things lined up neatly in a row. And I really wanted to use these characters to show kind of a real range of how
Mm.
OCD presents because it's often misdiagnosed. So I did do some research for that because I wanted to get that right. That's not necessarily my experience. And I talked to a lot of people and spoke to some great therapist experts as well on their side of it. And one thing that really surprised me actually was, and I did manage to get it into the book, but a therapist I spoke to said that lots of therapists don't like treating OCD. It's actually a really difficult thing to treat as a therapist. It's a really horrible illness to have to kind of work through with somebody, which I found really interesting.
Mm.
But yeah, so it's hopefully, I like to think the book it doesn't come across as a lecture. Um,
No, not at all.
but yeah, it was quite interesting kind of trying to use that lived experience and that research in a way that still felt like a really good pacey thriller.
So because I find the therapy side of it really interesting as well. So do therapists not like treating it because it's so diverse, because it can have so many different things, or just because I guess with certain, I mean, I guess all mental health conditions are quite different to each individual, but is OCD one that's very, very difficult to sort of?
I think it depends. I think it's because if you're treating a patient who's got a real fear that if they stop doing something, something's going to happen to their loved one or their child. As the therapist, you've got to be the person to say you've got to do it anyway. You know, there's
Yeah.
only one way through OCD, and that's to do the things that make you anxious and push through that anxiety. So people might have heard of exposure therapy. It's a very similar treatment for phobias, actually. But if you're the therapist that says, I don't care if you think that your husband might get hit by a car, you need to go and do X. That can be a really difficult
Yeah.
relationship with the therapist, I think. Um,
Yes, I guess it's very much it's different than sort of putting in things in place, sort of like to say, oh, you know, you need to do this, or but also, yeah, it's quite. I know people who've had sort of exposure therapy, and it can be quite. It's quite traumatic for them as well, because they're basically just going against everything their body's telling them to do.
yeah, and there's a lot of trust there as well in that relationship, that you trust that that therapist knows
Yeah.
um, what the best thing for you is. And often, and I found this, the things that on the surface you seem scared of and that you have to push through in exposure therapy, often there's a lot more under the surface that you have to get to as well. So it's yeah, horrible illness, and
Mm.
I can empathise with therapists that don't like treating it. But it was really interesting to hear that from the experts.
Yeah. And interesting from in your sort of in the book as well, because you're dealing with children that have it, so you know that's, I guess that's another a very different take as well, because I wonder how you said it's misdiagnosed, but I wonder whether that's because it sort of manifests itself in different ways, that and also children are going through, you know, if it's teenagers or something, can be going through lots of other things, you know, hormonal puberty, that sort of thing, that sort of masks other things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the problem with the diagnosis side is often it's GPs or medical professionals or um, you know, the NHS is really strange. You might have only a limited time to do kind of that initial assessment. So lots of people with OCD of all ages, but I think particularly children and teenagers do end up going around the houses to get a diagnosis, and being sent to things that aren't necessarily going to help them, because that's not what the problem is. I think the other thing that was really important for me in the book to show was people in recovery. I think sometimes in fiction, we really like reading about the people who are at rock bottom, and you
Yeah.
don't necessarily get to see the people who are fine, who've come out the other side. So yeah, it was really important to me to show, of these five, they're
Yeah.
all various stages of that journey.
I mean, it was there's. I mean, you sort of. I guess you. I was going to say, were there any challenges to writing the book? But also, I was going to then lead on to it's written from multiple points of view, isn't it? The book. So, was that a challenge? Because I mean, it's not a challenge to read it, but I did wonder how you sort of whether you did each character individually, whether you wrote it sort of more linearly, like you did it as a, how did that sort of work? And was that a challenge?
See, I think it's actually easier writing from multiple point of views, because you can kind of give your characters a breather.
Yeah.
I think and it changes stuff up for the reader as well. It gives you a bit of a break from being in one person's head for too long. I do tend to write in quite a linear way. I tend to plan so far ahead, write that in a big rush, and then stop and be like, now what? And then I start planning again. So a bit
Yeah.
of a mix of a plotter and a pantser. I think writing from the different point of views, one problem I had was that initially I just had too many point of view characters, and there were lots of characters that we saw from just a little bit, and the big challenge came from who do I actually want to tell the story,
Yeah.
and I rewrote a lot of scenes to be from other perspectives. But two of my other point of view characters in the book are Lily and Callum, who we see quite a lot of,
Yeah.
and I loved writing them. And they've got quite an odd, strained relationship.
Oh
That
yeah, I really like those because again, they've both got they've got their history, haven't they? And Callum has got quite significant mental health issues, and we find out we can't say too much about them, but we find out that they've got this history, and it's quite a complicated history as well. Um, but yeah, I like both of them. They're really interesting characters, and yeah, completely. I think that they were probably the ones that I wasn't sure about all the way through. It was like, and I guess that was probably intentional. I can't say too much about what that happens, but yeah, it's that sort of the red herrings and the sort of unreliable narrator sort of thing, isn't it? Because you don't really know. There's a lot of in the book there are several sort of people that you don't know who whether what they're saying is true or whether it is.
Yeah, and that's really fun to write as well. I think there's one really big twist, and if people read it, when they read it, they'll be like, "Oh, that's what she was talking about." Um, and I thought it was so obvious. And every time I sent a draft to my agent, he would be like, "More clues, more references, more mentions." This feels really obvious now, and I really like, of all my friends who've read it, and there's been so many amazing bloggers. I've been blown away by the book blogging reviewing community, and so many of them have messaged me halfway through and been like, "I think it's this person," or "I think it's this. I think this is what's happening." Um,
I'm not going to tell you.
yeah, but I love it. Sometimes people come up with things and they think like, "I've spotted this clue," and that's so clever. And I was like, "That wasn't. I just put that in as a throwaway comment."
Yeah, that's just like the steer you off sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been really fun. So if anyone wants to message me with their theories, I would really enjoy it.
Have you had any like that you thought, oh, actually, that would have been quite good if I'd done that? Have you had any like that you sort of think, or you're like, no, you're way out?
I've had a couple. I've had a few people really take a dislike to certain characters, which I've really enjoyed. So that's been
Yeah.
fun.
I didn't really feel. I mean, yeah. I mean, there are some that are not particularly, but I didn't feel really, dislike. But I was unsure of some people. I would say probably more so than disliked them.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the really, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely terrifying that people are reading it when it's lived for so long on my computer alone as a sort of badly spelled Word document. So it's really exciting people reading it, but that's part of the joy, is that people have such different
Yeah.
responses to things, and completely different interesting theories. That's been really fun.
So Sarah's asked, what would your internet search history say if the police seized your computer? Well, I mean, obviously living with one, that might be a bit awkward.
Oh God. Well, I'm working on book 2 at the moment. There's a lot about accelerants and how fires start, and that's probably
Oh,
as much as I'm allowed to say.
okay.
But it does look quite suspect
You
in that.
definitely don't want a house fire in the next sort of.
Absolutely not. It will look like an insurance job at this point. So yeah, and but also lots about the fire brigade, which I don't know if people know, but there's quite a big police fire brigade rivalry. Um,
Oh, I didn't know that.
so the policeman boyfriend is not very impressed with my search history at the moment. Lots about the fire brigade on there, so
Do you think you're looking at hunky firemen instead?
I no comment. I couldn't put that on the record. Absolutely not.
Sarah's also asked, do you keep a folder of your characters? So I sort of got a bit of a hint, and I'm not sure whether I did, but there might be more of Liz. We might see more of Liz in the future.
We definitely will. I can say that for certain. I didn't have a file on my characters until, in the process of writing book 2, I realised I'd named them all the same things as they were in book 1. So I do now have a spreadsheet. And I think lots of writers get this, but in my edits, people's ages kept changing, and the timeline was, so I now have a very detailed timeline of where
Yeah.
everyone's worked, how long they've been in the police, all that kind of stuff, which is fun. So I'm trying to get organised at book 1,
Yeah.
make my life easier in future.
It could, because I remember speaking, I can't remember who it was, but they were on like book 21 or something, and they had to like, you have to like remember when their birthday is, what colour their eyes are, yes, things that you sort of say, like you say, as a throwaway comment can sort of, because people will pick you up and go, well, in book 1, their birthday was the 27th of May, and in book 5, it's the 29th of May.
Absolutely. And I think some writers find that quite stressful. My plan is, if anyone reaches out to tell me that, I'm gonna pretend they're the first person to ever spot it, call them a genius, and then kick myself afterwards. But yeah, it's quite a nice thing, though, I think, about starting to write a series, because you
Yeah.
kind of, you get to plant lots of seeds. There's lots of seeds in book 1 of things. I'm like, well, hopefully I'll come back to that in book 2, or that will be a nice thread.
Did you sort of always sort of intend for it to be a series then, or did that sort of progress as you were writing it? Did you sort of think, actually, I don't know, halfway through, that actually this could be more than one book?
I had absolutely no inkling that it could be a series, and then a few of my writer friends read it, um, and some of them came back and was like, "This is great. What are you going to do for book 2?"
So book 1 isn't done yet.
And that was, and then so when we were looking for a publisher, I kind of had it in my mind that it could be a standalone, but I also had some future avenues planned out, and I was very lucky that my editor loved Field as much as I do, so we will be getting more Field in the future.
That's good to hear. Going back to your sort of multiple point of views, there's one, isn't there, that's sort of an unknown narrator that sort of, and that was really interesting, sort of reading that sort of dialogue and not really knowing at the beginning where it was, who it was, what it was about. It's quite ambiguous, isn't it? Was that sort of fun to write? Was that hard to write?
It was really fun to write, and I think I really like it in books when you as the reader get information that other people don't get. and you
Yeah.
get those kind of clues. And actually, those kind of passages are a little bit of an insight into potentially the teenage experience.
Mm.
And some of those passages do come from stuff that I wrote when I was a teenager. So um, I borrowed a bit from my past self, which was fun. But yeah, really fun to write. And yeah, I hope they're satisfying to the reader. I hope the reader feels like they.
Yeah, no, I really like them. I like that sort of. I like a bit of ambiguity, and also, like you say, a little bit of an insight that, like the other, that she like Liz obviously didn't know, but also it was sort of you didn't know. You sort of guessing like, well, is this person? Is this what are they talking about? What's happening here? So yeah, it's sort of added that's another little a layer to the story. Um, Sort of what you said, you mentioned it briefly just now about the plotting, and you said I sort of what came. So you said that you had that little idea. Sort of what came next for you? Are you sort of quite a heavy sort of first drafter, or are you a edit quite heavily afterwards, the first draft sort of thing?
Um, I'm I tend to write the first draft pretty quickly. And what I usually do is I just go hell for leather with very little plan for about 20,000 words, and then stop and then go, right, what am I doing? So like I said, so for this book, I realized I'd started in the wrong place, and the very dramatic scene I had as an opening wasn't really making sense to people because they didn't know these characters yet.
Mm.
So that moved to about a third of the way in, which meant a lot of the stuff I'd already written was now unusable. And so I almost kind of stopped at 20,000 words and did a big edit, and then I plotted at that point. So it's a bit of a it's a bit of a hybrid.
Yeah,
I think sometimes I did start once I started writing a murder mystery or thriller kind of set in a pub, and I got to the 20,000 word mark and looked back over it and realised I'd just been enjoying describing a pub and all the regulars, and there wasn't much thrill in it. But I think it's kind of important to, for me, it's really important to have that bit of I can just write, and
yeah,
if I get to 20,000 words and it's not a novel, put it in a drawer. One of those characters will come back, or that setting will get used one day,
yeah.
and it kind of takes the pressure off. If I had to sit down and plan the whole novel out from the outset, I think I would spend longer planning than I would writing a first draft.
So you are really a real hybrid between the two, then. So you sort of pants but plot at the same time.
Yeah, and
Yeah, cool.
it's a real nightmare. In book 2, I got to the 60,000 word mark, and I was on the home straight. Oh, it's going to be done any minute now. And then as I was plotting the ending, I was like, oh, I've got to go back and change a whole timeline, change a whole character, because otherwise it won't make sense. And there's that sense of it's like you get almost to the finish line, and it's like, no, you've got to go back to the start line.
Yeah.
We're starting again. And go back and edit. But yeah, it seems to work for
It
me.
works for you. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's always, I think it does vary for different people, and some people have to literally plot within an inch of their life, and then other people literally just go with it. And it sounds like you're a bit in the middle of the two, which is good. What is, I'm getting more questions through. What is your favourite TV show, factual or true crime?
Ooh, I think it depends on the mood. I mostly, I think I would mostly say factual, but I think there are some moods where a really good documentary, a true crime. I think, to be honest, I tend to prefer non-murdery true crime. I think some aspects of the true crime genre make me a little bit uneasy,
Yeah,
and there are some true crime things that are just probably not for me. But like the Tinder swindler one, loved that, binged that really quickly. But yeah, the factual, I tend to go more on the factual side, I think.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of. I'm a little bit too squeamish. As much as I love my fiction and I love my crime fiction, and I don't mind a brutal murder in a book. I don't really want to see it as real life. It's pretend in the books, and I think that's the whole escapism of crime fiction, isn't it? Is that it is an escapism. I don't really, and I know people who love it, but I don't really. For me, it's not what I want to sort of to have. Um, Laura's just asked a really good question, which I love actually. So, if your character Liz Field could have a crossover story with any fictional detective, who would it be? I love that. It's a great question.
Oh, that is a great question. A fictional detective from TV. I would. This is maybe a rogue one from TV or books. I would quite like to see how Liz would have handled Broadchurch. I think get her in with David Tennant and Olivia
Yeah,
Colman. I think she would have said to David Tennant, "What is wrong with you?
yeah,
Pull your socks up. A kid's died." Yeah, I'm going to say Broadchurch. I think we'd have sent in a helicopter team from London for.
yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's really good. Because I think there's so many, isn't there? And like yeah, you could have gone, but actually putting her in the middle of a duo, that's clever. I like that. Who's sort of inspired your writing?
Um, so I think I read a lot of Famous Five when I was a kid. Famous Five was my favourite, as was Jacqueline Wilson, which probably explains the dark themes.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'd got into a real reading slump before COVID, and then during COVID as well.
Yeah, I didn't read much in COVID. I thought that I'd have all this time to do stuff, and I just couldn't focus on it.
Yeah, and the series actually really brought me back to reading, and especially reading crime, was actually the Dr. Ruth Galloway series. And I couldn't believe I'd never read them. I think we
Ellie
were,
Griffiths, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we were on book 8 or 9 at that point. But I adopted an old lady down the road and did all her shopping for her.
Oh,
I mean, it sounds really altruistic, but it was mostly so that I got to go to Sainsbury's twice a week instead of once a week. And every week I would give her shopping, and she would give me the next.
oh wow! So you really like got sort of like a
So
mobile library sort of thing.
yeah, and I binged them all really quickly, and then I felt really bad because I started reading them on NetGalley, and I'd get them before her once.
Oh no!
But yeah, so I think that was a really big influence on me, just in terms of how readable crime can be.
Yeah,
And actually, I think what Ellie Griffiths does so well is like build that world around the crime. And actually, you would buy the next book not only because it's going to be a great crime thriller, but because you're like, what's happening with
yeah.
Ruth?
I think having that sort of character, and we've talked about a few. Then that those sort of characters that become iconic in TV shows, you know, people sort of they become iconic because it's a TV show, but quite often they are from they're generally from a book, aren't they? First, so I think it's really interesting when you obviously write a new character. It's like would you like to see Liz or would you like to see Liz or Metelli, and who would she be? Who would you like to play her?
Oh, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think it is a little bit of a dream to see a character on telly, but it's interesting. There's not actually that many sort of proper Southeast London actresses that come to mind. I think probably someone who'd been in EastEnders. I'm a real EastEnders loyalist. I think as long as she'd been in EastEnders and was around the right age, I think that would be fun.
Well, Sarah Lancaster was in Coronation Street, wasn't she? Before she was
That's true.
Before she was Happy Valley. So yeah, so it shows that you can. And she played such a contrasting character to like what. Yeah, so you could really have any, because I was thinking you could have like Cat, Cat Slater.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be a Jessie Wallace. Yeah, that would be a real different, especially if we could get Alfie Moon in somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so we got so Sarah's saying that her mum gave her the first 3 books from Sue Grafton, which is another great series. So that's Yeah, we always like recommendations on here. So I know Ellie Griffiths. I know Kaz is a big fan of Ellie Griffiths, and lots of people in the group. So yeah, so that's a good recommendation. Um, so do you have a favourite author? I was going to ask you that question, and Sarah's also asked you that sort of question. So you said it's sort of Ellie Griffiths, and that's, is she sort of inspired your writing, or is she someone that you like to read as well?
She's definitely one I like to read. I think she's probably, I don't think she's necessarily super cozy, but she's definitely less bloody dark than what I'm writing. One of my absolute favourite writers is Catherine Ryan Howard, fantastic Irish writer.
Yeah,
And I think it's 56 Days. I'm still thinking about that book. I read it years ago. And I've just read her latest, actually, Burn After Reading.
I've
And
got that one here actually to read.
it just doesn't miss. And it's one of those, I love those writers where the trap was amazing, runtime was amazing. So yeah, she's probably my favorite just because as soon as her book comes out, I'm like, I'm gonna love this.
Your go-to, or yeah, sort of like your, I don't care what it is they've written, I'm going to read it anyway.
And also, she's really giftable. I've given so many people 56 days to read who aren't necessarily big crime readers, and they
Yeah,
loved it, and then really hardcore crime readers also love it. So yeah, it's a good recommendation, that one.
that's a good one when you get, yeah, when you get someone like that. Laura's just said that Kelly Bright, who plays Linda, she would be good, and she's the right
Yes,
age. And also,
really great.
isn't she going as well? So she might be looking for something else.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Kelly Bright would be great, actually. Um, oh, excellent ideas. I'm going to be using that one now. And if I get asked that question again, I've
Have
got.
you got a sort of a picture of her in your head? Because I know some people write, and they don't really have an idea of what they look like. I remember speaking to somebody and saying, actually, I've got no idea what he looks like, as this, and he'd written like loads of books, but he just said, I don't picture him like that when I'm writing. I can hear his voice, but I can't see his face. Is that, do you sort of have a picture? Obviously, you said your mum, but you don't. Do you picture your mum when you're thinking about her?
No, only because I couldn't actually imagine my mum at a crime scene. I think she'd be in a bit of a flap. She's definitely my mum, but with like the experience and
Yeah,
the police officer. I do have a rough idea of what she looks like, but it's not. I definitely hear her voice and know what she sounds like and how she would react to things
yeah,
more than I have like a picture of her face. One of the things it has been pointed out to me by my agent and my editor is I'm obsessed with describing people's shoes. And I think what shoes people have on is like such a indicator of them.
yeah.
But it did get to a point where I think they were like, right, stop with the shoes now.
Oh no, everybody's got the
Yeah,
same shoes.
we don't
Yeah,
know what anyone's hair color is. We don't know how tall anyone is or how old they are. But
you do know if they've got good shoes or bad shoes.
exactly. So, and also I think the shoe judgment's quite specific to me, and other
Yeah,
people might not have the same view of things that I do. So, so yeah, I think I definitely know what footwear everyone's got on.
yeah.
Nothing else.
That's good to know, because I mean I think shoes are important. I'm big on shoes and bags. I think is,
Yeah.
yeah, is an interesting thing. You talked at the beginning about, because I mean there's difficult themes in the book, and it is quite brutal. Actually, in the sort of the tagline, it says a man is found brutally stabbed, because he's not just like stabbed once, he's stabbed multiple times, isn't he? So did you sort of surprise yourself at any point about how bloody and violent you got when you were writing it?
Um, it was definitely the bloodiest thing I'd written so far, but I think with my TV drama watching history, um, I I wasn't too surprised. I
No.
think the thing for me, and I think it's why for me, I didn't want to kind of make it gratuitous or,
Yeah,
and I wanted to. I think sometimes when you read some novels, people seem like it dissipates very quickly. Like you have this really gory thing, and
Yeah.
then the plot's moved on. And I think that's why the book's set only over a couple of days. And that was one of the reasons was I kind of, and it maybe seems more gory because of that, because we stay in that moment for longer than we maybe would if it cut away
Yeah.
quickly. But yeah, I think that aftermath and the kind of what happens next, I find as interesting as the actual horrible wounds.
Yeah, because I found I really like that because the sort of aspect of like finding out, when she goes to the sort of the first victim, she finds out, from the hospital, where he's been stabbed, how many times, and I thought that was really interesting. The whole sort of how it happened, how they how much you can find out. And I know I watched lots of crime shows, but it was very detailed in that sort of information given. So yeah, that was and I guess also you wanted it to be realistic, and I think that sort of makes it realistic. You don't want it to be gratuitous, but you don't want it to be unreal as well.
Yeah, I did. I got one review which compared the opening to Adolescence, which I thought was a very high and undeserved compliment. But I think that kind of fly on the wall look at this scene. And talking of experts, I spoke to actually, my next door neighbour is a paramedic, and we went for a neighbourly day out, um, and everyone else sat there with their wine like this, while we went step by step. And then what do you do? And then what do you do? And she loved it, and I did name the paramedic after her. She's very pleased. But we did put everyone else off their red wine, I have to say.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's quite interesting how many of us read crime, but I hate blood, so but I don't have to see it. I think if I'm reading a crime book, so I think that maybe that's the difference between the TV and the. So if I'm watching a crime TV, I'm a bit of a Poirot girl, or a older sort of school. I just started watching
Yeah.
Bookish with Mark Gatiss, and I like that sort of more. I suppose you would call it cozy crime. I'm not really into your sort of Vera, and I did really like Happy Valley though, which is quite.
Gets
And
there.
in a book, you don't have to visualize what you don't want to, do you? So you don't, it's not in your face. So
Yeah,
um,
and I think also it's really interesting what affects different people. Like I I can't watch horror. I can just about read horror. But I read Misery recently by it's the Stephen King book, and was
yeah,
just hyperventilating on the DLR, like, and I had to take breaks. I actually can't cope.
it's quite brutal. It's very
Yeah,
brutal. I mean, I read that years ago.
and not even the gruesome bits, just the tension and the suspense ranking up. And I know other people who've read it and been like, yeah, it was good. But I guess it's what you respond to and what you find.
Yeah, it's your sort of tolerance, isn't it? Yeah, see, I read Rats when I was far too young by James Herbert, and literally cannot abide rats now. And it's just, yeah, like I was probably about 13 when I read it, and yeah, I was far too young. And I can probably remember very much the words because it's so visual. The first scene, it's just. Ugh. But yeah, I think I sort of, I think with a book it can be like really visceral and make you feel uneasy, like you said, but you can put it down. I mean, you can hide behind the cushion as well, can't you? But
And I think the audiobooks are a really interesting one for that as well. I think there are some books when I'm listening to them and the audiobook has got me so tense, I'm like, I've got to switch the paperback because
yeah,
someone describing it to you feels worse than reading it. And I think it's that similar thing of you can kind of decide what to visualize. Yeah, I read the first Tess Gerritsen novel on audiobook.
yeah.
Just be like, oh my god, I can't cope up there. I'm not as non-squeamish as maybe this book would make me seem. Maybe it's because I was writing this one that I didn't get quite as tense.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think I guess it's your sort of, that you're not going to be. I mean, were you surprised by, like I say, you're not going to be surprised, but were you surprised when you were writing? Did things happen that you didn't think were going to happen? I know you're not a plotter per se, but did things go in a completely different direction than you thought they were going to?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's that thing about being a high, I'm going to use your word, I'm going to steal that, hybrid,
Yeah,
because you've plotted out the next section and you think you know where you're going, and then suddenly you start typing like, oh, am I gonna do, is that gonna, oh my god.
yeah,
And I've had a couple of those moments in book 2 as well, actually, which is really fun. You get yourself into a big editing rabbit hole because then you have to go back and fix
yeah,
in the rest of the book. But yeah, I think sometimes if things go in a direction that you weren't anticipating, that makes it more fun for the reader as well.
yeah. No, definitely. Um, Sarah says she's not read Stephen King. Oh, you're missing out there. I mean, he's got a lot now. I mean, when I started reading them, he hadn't got so many, but yeah, there's a lot. But she's reading Chris Carter. I don't know Chris Carter. Is Chris Carter horror?
Yeah, I think it's on the
Horror side.
I've got a Chris Carter on the shelf, on the TBR shelf. And I do reach every now and then and think, oh no, it's going to be really scary. So I will, I'll be brave and I'll get Chris Carter on the list. But meant to be fantastic. I know lots of people who are massive.
Yeah. Are you a mood reader? Do you sort of because I mean, I very much am. I will read most genres, although crime is probably my favorite, I think. But I definitely have like a rom-com, moment. I'll have a sort of historical moment. So do you like, would you pick up, sometimes you might think, oh, I'm going to be a horror, sometimes I'm going to do a rom-com.
I tend to read 2 or 3 books at once, and I think it's for that very reason. So I'll
Yeah.
have a non-fiction audiobook on the go, and then a crime novel that I'm reading, and then usually something a bit rogue. And yeah, for that very reason of sometimes you just fancy one thing more than something else. I read a lot of plays, and if there's any
Oh, that's
writing,
interesting.
I really recommend reading plays actually, because um, I think if you're writing, you're often told like show don't tell, show things through dialogue, show things through what isn't said, and in a play where you haven't necessarily got that prose or that kind of what's going on in people's heads, they have to put all of that into the dialogue and often quite sparse stage directions.
Yeah.
So I think reading plays has been really good training for how to write dialogue and how to write those really difficult scenes where lots is being not said.
Yeah. That is
And
interesting. Yeah, that's because I mean, I struggle to read. I mean, I wonder, do you listen to, or do you actually physically read? Yeah,
I physically read them, and I think it's a bit of a it takes a bit of practice. It feels quite weird. And when I haven't read a play for ages and I go back to it, you do sometimes feel a bit like, what's going on? I think if it's something that you're trying to get into, I'd really recommend reading plays that you've seen. So like, I think like Tennessee Williams is like a really good place to start,
yeah,
or like I've read Streetcar Named Desire so many times now, so that you kind of have a picture of what's going on. And there's lots of good plays. I really recommend Seawall by Simon Stevens that don't have stage directions, so it's just like reading a stream of consciousness,
okay,
and they can be really good. But yeah, I think it's something
that's
we
really
should
interesting.
get
Yeah,
more into. I think reading plays.
yeah. I think probably mine's comes from like school of having to read Shakespeare, which is quite dry. I actually got Mousetrap, which is the Agatha Christie, and I went to see that. So actually, maybe that I have got it, and I just haven't read it. So maybe I'll pick that up now. I'll be inspired to pick up a play and read it. So, um, just before we're coming up to the end, did you what have you read recently that you would like to recommend? It doesn't have to
So
be crime; it can be anything. So,
I think so. I've been reading a lot of debuts because obviously I think when you're a debut author, you kind of read a lot of your friends.
yeah,
one that came out this month, Flat 401 by Kingsley Pearson. Great book. More of a kind of psychological, slow burn thriller of like really emotional and tense and kind of what's going to happen. So Flat 401, I think, is a really good recommendation. Sick to Death by Chris Bridges. Another great book about one of the main characters has chronic illness, and
yes, I had Chris on, and that's really good. Yeah, that's a brilliant book. Yeah,
that's a really fun one. And then I would really recommend Burn After Reading by Catherine Ryan Howard, which I finished yesterday. Not a debut, my favorite, but one of my favorites. And that's about a woman who is ghostwriting for a man who's suspected of killing his wife, and he's going to write this book to tell the story of how he didn't or did do it. She's not sure, but
that might be creeping up my TBR pile now, because I got gifted a copy a while ago, and it hasn't been like I need to read this now, but then I moved it yesterday from one side of the room to the other, so I think I'm going to move it into August now.
Yeah, it's a good it's really bingeable. Like one more chapter.
So, any plans for publication day?
So we've got a big launch party tomorrow, which will be fun. I spent all day baking biscuits.
Nice.
Which is fun. And then but I'm on a deadline for book 2, so I've got this weekend to swan about, feeling all excited, and then it's back to the writing desk, back to the day job, which is fun.
Are you going to be going out hunting out copies at all over the weekend?
Maybe. We'll see. I think, but I don't think I think it will just be that kind of drive by, have a look at it. I think I'll be too shy to go and.
You're going to go and stand like this in the shop.
No, well, maybe we'll see. I'll say that, and then
you must. Yeah. Well, even if you don't sort of share it, maybe just keep it for yourself. Just go. This is my book.
Cute.
I guess I think it must be really exciting, especially when it's your first one, because I imagine it's really exciting when you've written 10, but the first one is really special, and you must be really proud.
I am, and it's really it is a really bizarre feeling. I've been winding everybody up because I keep saying to everybody that I think I'm on a Derren Brown show. So I think it's like Channel 4. Can we hypnotize someone to think that their lifelong ambitions come true? And, I'm not on a Facebook Live at the moment. I've just been hypnotized, and I'm in a back room somewhere. And at the launch, Derren's going to pop out. So I've been winding everyone up and saying that I won't believe it's really happening until Derren Brown has firmly not made an appearance.
Yeah.
Apart from, but if I am on Derren Brown, then I called it and I knew I was. So that's
you did. It's not going to be like that one about that's in the air. I can't remember what it's called. That film that's in the airport where he doesn't know that he's on. Is it in the airport? No, the Truman Show, isn't it? Where he doesn't realise he's on the TV show. That's it. Yeah, I was thinking of the other one.
But maybe I'll have to write a thriller about it one day. But that Derren Brown one where he convinced that man he was in the zombie apocalypse, just But so maybe that's why it doesn't feel quite real yet. Is because I don't quite believe it myself. So hopefully, I'll spot it in a bookshop, and then it'll feel real.
So Sarah said, "Do you remember at Harrogate saying if she wanted to read your book?"
I do, of course I do. Yeah,
yes, she does. She does remember, Sarah. So yes, I don't know whether she wanted to. Yeah, so she's read it anyway, and she loved it. So that's good. Good news. Thank you, Hannah, for joining us this evening. And well done on your first book and your first interview, which was absolutely cracking. I didn't know it was your first, so you've done very, very well. So
thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I hope the launch goes really well on Thursday, and that you sell lots and lots of copies. And if you want to come back and talk to us about book 2, we'd love to have you back.
Oh, that'll be fun. Definitely. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, and see you all again soon. So I try and turn this off.